This episode will be super personal, but I promise it's still relevant for you. So when I was 13, I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and for the next few years, I used that as an excuse subconsciously. So I still did everything I wanted to do, but subconsciously, I used it as an excuse to not progress the way I would want to. And I talk about that because I see that a lot with high-performing women that I talk to on a weekly basis, that they're using their careers and the lack of time they have, the responsibility and their stress as an excuse subconsciously to achieve whatever they want to achieve with their health and fitness. So when I was diagnosed at 13, what this meant for me mentally and physiologically is constant blood sugar monitoring, insulin, right? Using the syringe in the early years, and energy instability, meaning I would crash after lunch, I would have very fluctuating energy levels, would feel good, next moment I would feel super bad, and it's still the case. And then there's two ways you can handle such a situation. The easy story, which I've been following and believed in for a couple of years, was life is just harder for me, and it is, right? It is by a matter of fact, because we know that chronic health conditions like type 1 diabetes, but also things like insulin resistance, thyroid issues, Hashimoto's, and right, you name it, are making it tougher for you to progress with whatever you're doing because of that physiological stress load that you have, which means that your body is working harder just to maintain that level of homeostasis, which means your baseline cortisol, your baseline stress is elevated, and there is more inflammation in your body, which was the case for me starting at 13, and it's measurably harder. So it's just more difficult than with someone without diabetes. But the question is not whether it's more difficult. The question is not whether your career influences how difficult your fat loss journey will be. The question is how you handle that, because you will always find reasons why things in your life make it harder for you to lose weight. If you have 3 children at home, if your husband is going through a tough time, then there's you will always find something. So the question is how you handle that, and what this comes down to, if you ask me from my experience, is this victim mindset. If you're using any external factor, that could be anything, whatever you feel like is your biggest struggle at the moment in your life, and right, working with high-performing women, it's usually their 12-hour days, careers, business, travel. If you're just thinking about how this limits you and using that, and then they're tying that back to how you're performing at work, how you're performing in your training, when you're eating, or even just whatever you want to build in your life, you as the role model in your family, for example. Then when you're just thinking about how this is limiting you, then you're focusing on the wrong thing, because focusing on that already, just thinking about how this would limit you, is getting you into this victim mindset, and you're focusing on what's stopping you. And that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will always just think about what's stopping you instead of actually thinking about what can you do. What can you do with what you have? Because think about it a different way. There's always someone that has a harder time than you, right? If you grew up also in a first world country, quote unquote, in the Western world, then you're already having a way easier time than the majority of the rest of the population, right? So think about it from a different lens as well. So what I'm talking about is not physiologically what's happening to you, but how you what you focus on in life. If it's the things that are holding you back, or are you focusing on the things where you actually have a lever, right? If you're career driven, chances are you make money, right? So money gives you opportunities, gives you freedom to an extent, right? If you have a family, of course, your time is limited to an extent, but just think about the things that you can do with your life instead of the things that you can't do with your life. And for me personally, it took years, right? I was thinking about what's limiting me, what's holding me back, and I'm still fighting that. It's not that I solve this for the rest of my life, but these days, 99% of the times, I'm not using diabetes as an excuse, even though I could, right? I'm not thinking, oh, I didn't make it to my training session because of low blood sugar I had the early morning, and then I was busy because I needed to get my blood sugar back up, and then I couldn't finish my work, and then I needed to finish the work while I was working out. No, I'm just going to my training session. So there's no question about that. So that's where I'm coming from. So for me, that specific moment where things shifted from that, what I would call victim mentality or victim mindset, to a more productive mindset, was actually not a specific moment, but it was a slow realization and shift by things like noticing that there's people with harder circumstances still making it happen. right? And then asking myself the uncomfortable questions, like, am I using this as like an excuse? And like that was like the slow realization of when it shifted towards doing something doing something more productive, right? When I started the research on what I could actually do about the inflammation in my body, right? Improving my gut health, improving my energy levels, and things started working. And that's really like where the slow realization out of this victim mindset happened. And for me, honestly, it was a catalyst, because if I think about what happened later on during my life, and we're talking still about my teens, right? I played handball for all my life from like the age of 3 to the age of 17. And at 17, I actually realized already throughout my teens, like at the age of 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, that handball wasn't fully my thing. I wasn't bad at it, not at all. I was actually quite good, I would say, but still, I knew that it was not my thing. And when I then started finding out about things like dancing, martial arts, strength training, mobility training, doing handstands, like what I'm still doing nowadays, this early on asking myself the uncomfortable questions and going out of my comfort zone then allowed me, in spite of handball was like my whole social environment, right? Like everyone in my town played handball and was just like what people did there. So it was also like super uncomfortable to stop that, which I did at 17. So I stopped playing handball, which was super uncertain for me and felt like a super big decision, like similar to moving to a new city or like leaving your known environment. It was the second time I made such an uncomfortable decision, I would say. And right early on, getting out of this victim mindset really helped me do these uncomfortable decisions, which led to so much growth, which then in turn was the basis for everything else that I did in life afterwards up to this point. So that's just so interesting to see for me that facing that uncomfortable realization of you being in that victim mindset leads to so much growth, and it might be for you too. And sometimes it's subconscious, right? A lot of times you're doing everything, but then still subconsciously you're still like seeing yourself as this person that can make less progress because of XYZ reason. And there might be some room for you to progress here and there too, by just focusing on things that are more pragmatic and more goal directed than focusing on the things that are holding you back. And I actually looked up a little gold nugget for you here, for you guys, which is that there's psychological research, which is not my field by any means, even though sometimes talking to my clients, I feel more like a psychologist than I feel like a health and fitness coach. But there's some psychological research on what they call post-traumatic growth, and it shows that people who reframe adversity, any form of challenges, as a catalyst and as a room for improvement and room for growth, rather than a sentence or rather than something that's holding them back or is like bad for their life, they demonstrate measurably higher resilience, performance, and life satisfaction. So for your mental well-being, for you feeling good, and also like for your resilience, which if you're a leader, right? If your family is looking up to you, at least your children are looking up to you, or your team is looking up to you, that is so important, right? You need to be resilient. You need to lead from the front. That only works with resilience. And the constraint really doesn't disappear. It's really that the relationship to that constraint changes everything. So it's really like about the framing. And I also want to dive in with you why this is relevant for the health and fitness situation specifically. I already addressed quickly why this is relevant for you too, but let's go through your day-to-day, right? If you have 10-hour days, you have high pressure at your job, you're traveling, doing business travel, but also you're taking care of your family, and you're a woman that's older than 35, meaning you're going through hormonal challenges and changes also in the upcoming years, then it is harder for you than for someone with a lighter schedule. Genuinely, it's like just more difficult for you than it is for a man in a similar at a similar age, or someone that is a bit younger than you, or someone that has a lighter schedule, that has less responsibility and a lower pressure job. And if you use that even just subconsciously to delay the change, then it's a very similar situation that I had with my diabetes. It's like I'll start when things calm down, right? There's something I hear every single week, if not every single day. I'll start my journey when things calm down, when this project is finished, when I submitted XYZ paper, when this vacation is finished, right? That's when I start. and I don't have the time. I don't have the time that others have. My situation is unique. It's different, and these are all true, but they're also all excuses. Because if you would think about your health and fitness journey, like you, for example, you want to lose body fat and tone up and get back your energy. If you would think about these things like you would think about taking a shower, like your daily hygiene, or brushing your teeth, which is something you do daily, then it becomes obvious that delaying it doesn't make any sense. But your energy and your internal health, which your body fat has a lot to do with, is just as important as your daily hygiene, isn't it? Right? So delaying that, even if it's just a vacation or it's just this next project, is already the problem, right? Because if you're only starting in a time where it's more relaxed, then you're also, of course, only making it happen in that time. And then the actual key becomes suddenly how to do it in a time when you're more busy. So this is just like one of the reasoning patterns, or the logic behind what I hear every single day from women that say, hey, I want to delay their journey and I don't want to like start right now. So the question, if we reframe that back to my diabetes story as well, the question isn't whether it's harder for you. The question is, who else has your exact life and is already where you want to be? And that's not to compare or pressure. It is a comparison, of course, but it's a comparison that should be helping you, and you shouldn't feel judged by that. Maybe it's triggering you, maybe you feel judged, but it's a comparison really to make sure that you're actually thinking about what is possible, and like you're also like other people are also not, they also don't have more willpower, don't have more discipline, right? Or they slowly got there as well. So it's really about like not focusing on what's holding you back, but focusing on what you can actually do. Okay, and again, same with my chronic condition, with like a high pressure job, your baseline cortisol will genuinely be higher. Or there's a tendency that the baseline cortisol is higher when you're more stressed. And that, of course, also has to do with an increased insulin resistance or suppressed thyroid functioning, because, right, the conversion from T4 to T3 is, for example, slowed down, and T3 is that active thyroid hormone that then leads to you burning sufficient calories throughout the day. Also, it increased baseline cortisol has to do with impaired, disrupted sex hormones. So this is real physiology. It is an actual constraint, and it's something that's genuinely holding you back. But the question is, what are you really like focusing on when you're thinking about that on a day-to-day? So if we had to sum up, how do we properly think about that health and fitness journey? It's not that there's no constraint. It's about deciding that the constraint doesn't get to make that decision for you and prevent you from actually being healthy and living your best life. For me personally, managing blood sugar wasn't optional, and I'll tell you something, so many diabetics out there, so you might not be too interested in that if you don't have type 1 diabetes, but if you look up type 1 diabetes on the Instagram Reels section or even on Facebook, type 1 diabetics are in such a victim mindset, because most of them really like constantly use it as an excuse. It's wild to see. They're constantly talking about that, but not from a perspective of elevating each other, but telling each other why they are right on not being able to do whatever they want to do in life. So it's just excuses. It's wild. And for me, that managing of blood sugar isn't optional. And what I just want to say is that so many diabetics really don't manage their condition properly, and they just let it slip, and they have like constantly elevated blood sugars, which is really, really detrimental to their health. And for me, this is just something I then decided to not accept anymore. So I built the structure around it. And if I have a busy day or a busy week or I'm traveling, I'm also traveling for business, right? I have my own business, obviously, and I'm traveling when I take seminars around the world. But I built the structure around it. I don't have any other way. And yes, I would actually have there would actually be an alternative, which is just letting it slip. And that's what so many do. But for me, it's just a decision that I won't do it. And I've made that decision more than 10 years ago, and I've never let it slip ever since, not one single day. And if you can take that kind of ownership towards your journey, toward your health and fat loss journey, being fit, being healthy, being energetic, that's going to really change you. And for me, it led to me understanding metabolism better than any other coach ever will understand their metabolism, because I was forced to, and I didn't give myself the opportunity to not take care of that anymore. So the busy schedule isn't going away, and even if it gets more relaxed, the structure has to fit your schedule, not the other way around. And that's also why a lot of times I like to say is a bit dangerous to follow this generic fitness advice that is all about weighing all your food, tracking all your macros, and doing like working out every single day, because that a lot of times is really detrimental, because then you are ambitious and you want to make a change, but you are faced with things that are not really realistic, that you see a lot on social media. And it's, I would say actually 99% of the fitness advice out there revolves around the tracking of your food and weighing everything, which is just not realistic. And then, of course, that can lead to burnout, right? Because you're just stressing yourself, you're motivated, you're making that decision, and then suddenly you're being faced with things that are super unrealistic, that were actually made for someone with an empty schedule and only focused on working out. So yeah, I can just tell you, stop waiting for the quieter season. You will never feel ready. This feeling of readiness will come when you tackle it, when you're busy, and you then understand, oh, it's actually manageable. I can actually do it. And that's when you feel ready. But that only comes from facing the uncertainty, which for me also was like stopping handball, right? Facing the uncertainty. Okay, what happens? How will I feel when I actually take ownership of my condition? And I'll actually start tackling it without finding excuses. So yeah, stay consistent, start exactly in the busy times, and that's always like messy action is always better than planning and doing everything perfect and waiting for the perfect. Before we finish, I'll tell you one thing that changed my life for the better completely ever since I made that decision when I was 13 or a bit older. I don't even remember specifically anymore, but essentially when I started to take ownership of my condition. And if I wouldn't have done that, my life would have taken a completely different turn, because what happened in these years after I got diagnosed and I didn't take ownership, like drinking and even smoking became normal for me. Also when I was 14, 15, 16, and I was like going out in the weekend and quote unquote partying, drinking, smoking, as I said. And I don't even know where I would be now if I wouldn't have started like with this realization and ownership mindset, that I didn't have a role model back then. There was no one telling me to do so or calling out my stuff, because I was living in an environment with the friends that I had back then for whom that was normal. That was just a normal lifestyle. And that kind of ownership, luckily, I took the ownership myself. As I said, I didn't have a role model or anything. So I started with that. And I don't know where I would be if I wouldn't have done that. And you don't know what you don't know. Like the energy that this gave me, the confidence that it gave me, because I started finding martial arts, dancing, strength training, also like, of course, the visual side, right? Like my body starting to look better, all of these things. It gives me a kind of confidence that was absolutely crucial for everything else that came in my life, right? For the relationships I had afterwards, for the job that I got one day after I graduated from secondary school, right? Or high school, depending on where you live. And then, right, also what I did in university, like it was absolutely essential for everything that came afterwards. And if you're already a high achiever and you're driven in your career, and you made it somewhere, like you got somewhere with your career, then imagine what else could happen if you took ownership of your health now, right? What would happen in the next decades if your confidence would be on another level, if your energy would be on another level, and the level I'm talking about that you can't even imagine right now. Because what was the case for me is like back in the day, I couldn't have imagined how I feel right now, the energy that I have now, and the confidence that I have now. I wouldn't be able to imagine that. So we don't know what we don't know, and I also don't know what's happening in the future. But just like think of also the upside of what's going to happen if you take in ownership, and how much that can change your life. And also on the other side, what happens if you don't, right? What happens if you keep waiting? Every single year you spend is not just a year where you waited, but it's a year that you then can't get back. It's a year where you can't have this compounding effect of your energy, confidence, but also general like metabolic improvements, like reduced inflammation on your energy, your blood sugar, on your well-being, on your better functioning immune system, right? The time that you waste is not just about the time itself, but also the lack of compounding effect that that would usually happen if you took care of it properly. It's also not just your well-being, right? It's also your responsibility that you have toward others, because you're the role model, right? The promotions that you get because of that, the date that you might have that you enjoy, the partner that you get, the dress that you enjoy, and the morning that you wake up and you're in a good mood, you're feeling great, and you're not snapping at your partner or your family. So think about it like from both perspectives, like what it costs you, but also like just imagine how your life would be able to change, even if you can't specifically imagine it. So for me personally, to finish it up, I didn't stop making excuses because my situation got easier. I didn't do it this way around. I stopped because I decided that the situation wasn't going to make the decision for me anymore. So I didn't wait for that moment to come up. It only works this way. You're only going to feel ready when you start taking quote unquote messy action. And then with your first couple successes, then you start feeling confident and you feel ready. Okay. So go ahead, start the journey, whatever this looks like. And I'm looking forward to the next one.